Boys, what's good? It's Herm. I'm here today with my final big board of 2022 for the NBA draft. And today is a special one as I'm having the top 60 prospects ranked. I'm going to go in detail on the top 30 with measurables, skills, as well as comparisons. And then with the picks, well, not picks, but with the guys 31 through 60, I'm just going to list them off to you today because I thought maybe you guys would be interested. But before I get into it, think about subscribing. It's free, it's easy. If you don't enjoy the content, you can always unsubscribe later, that's fine. But without further ado, let's just get into the mock draft. Big board. Let's get into the big board. At number 1 for me, Paolo Banchero out of Duke, 6'10". I report on my phone right before I'm recording this video, Paolo Banchero has measured 6'10.5" without shoes on. So with shoes, will be like 6'11.5", 7 feet tall. As a guy who can handle the ball as well as be a great scorer of the ball. 250 pounds, 19.6 years old on draft night. Will play power forward in the NBA, freshman out of Duke. And he reminds me a little bit of Detroit Blake Griffin, a guy that can handle you in multiple ways, still pretty athletic, excels at getting to the rim, passing the ball, can shoot a little bit as well, and also break down his defenders. That to me is the best version of Blake Griffin, although he was often injured. He's just more versatile than we saw anything else of him. And I think Paolo Banchero can be that type of player, but to an even better extent. I really like Banchero. To me, has the highest likelihood of being, the best player on a really good team out of this entire draft. If I was Orlando, I would take Banchero 1, especially because they need a primary scorer, and Banchero is that. So if I was them, I'd go Banchero, but I'm not, the GM of the Magic. But to me, the best player in the class, Paolo Banchero out of Duke. At number 2, I have Jabari Smith Jr. out of Auburn, 6'10", 220 pounds, 19 years old. The best shooter in this draft class, whether it be, catch and shoot, off the dribble, or hitting in the mid-range as well. The best shooter in this draft class, as well as being a really good perimeter defender as well. Will play power forward in the league, freshman for Auburn, and to me reminds me a little bit of Rashard Lewis with his offensive package. Michael Porter Jr. on that end as well, but also a very good perimeter defender. Needs to work on the post defense a little bit, but great on the perimeter. At number 3, I have Chet Holmgren out of Gonzaga, 7'1", 195 pounds, 20 years old. Just a guy we haven't really seen before. A guy this tall, this thin, with the ability to block shots, to play good defense, to be a great passer of the ball, see the floor well, and shoot it consistently with high efficiency. We just haven't really seen that, but reminds me a little bit of Kristaps Porzingis. When he's healthy, he's kind of on and off, but reminds me of Porzingis with better defense. A big concern about Porzingis is at times the defensive ability, while being a good shot blocker, is a guy that can get targeted in, pick and rolls or pick and pops, but I don't think Chet Holmgren will get targeted on screens. Should be able to defend the perimeter as well as the post. I think he needs to put on a little more weight. I think if he can even settle to like 215, I think that'd be phenomenal for him, and he could really achieve the best version of himself. But a guy that's really versatile, can do a lot of things well, and is the third best player in the class to me. Can't speak today. Got a lot of allergies, so sorry for anything going on. But at number 4, I have Jaden Ivey out of Purdue, 6'4", 195 pounds. This is one of the guys you're scared not to take just because he feels like a guy that can be a dominant NBA player with his ability to score, attack the rim, be great in transition, have flash defensive plays, whether it be blocks, steals, that good stuff. He's going to give his effort out there all the time. Probably more of a shooting guard in the NBA to me, more than a point guard, but very similar to guys like Dwayne Wade, Donovan Mitchell, John Morant, athletic players that are great at attacking the rim, but have a little more diverse offensive package than that than just being super athletes. Like, think of Russell Westbrook with a more perimeter-based offense as well. So I like Jaden Ivey a lot. And to me, I think he's the 4th best player here. At number 5, I have Keegan Murray out of Iowa. 6'8", 225 pounds. 21 years old, will be 22 when he plays his first game. Power forward, sophomore for Iowa, and just was one of the best players in the country this year. As a guy that doesn't have a lot drawn up for him, is really low maintenance scorer. Guys like Pascal Siakam, Al Horford come to mind as guys that don't really need stuff drawn up for them, but will still find ways to score. Averaged over 20 points a game this year for Iowa and was just phenomenal in so many different aspects, whether it be his defensive versatility, can basically guard 2 through 5, or his ability ability to pass, to set screens, to shoot. They're just going to do a lot of different things for you. I think this is just one of those guys that fits basically in any offense, and to me that's a good selling point. So I really like Keegan Murray. Is number 5 on my board. At 6, I have SHAEDON Sharpe out of Kentucky. 6'5", 200 pounds, 19 years old. Probably has a little higher upside than a guy like Keegan Murray, but you know, the lack of competition he's played against has me a little hesitant to put him above Keegan, but I still really love him as a prospect. Has to be a top 6 guy in my opinion. You know, is going to play shooting guard in the league. You know, freshman at Kentucky, but never played there. And to me, reminds me a lot of guys like Paul George, Jalen Green, as kind of taller shooting guards. A little taller, not super tall, but can shoot the 3 as well as attack the rim. And, you know, just really good at being a 3-level scorer, very versatile offensively, as well as just being a phenomenal athlete. One of those guys that could be really great or could be a bust. He's pretty much the biggest swing in this entire draft class. At number 7, I have Dyson Daniels for the G League Ignite. Huge guard, 6'7", some say 6'8", 195 pounds, 19 years old. Point guard for the G League Ignite. I love tall point guards. Those are great to me. I think they're really great in today's NBA. Really show off that kind of positionless basketball that is kind of the best part of the current NBA to me. And I really like Dyson Daniels. Not a great offensive player right now. The shot really needs to come along, but there is some shooting upside there, but will be phenomenal defensively from day one, as well as being a good passer, a good rebounder, and just does all the little things. Compared to both Lonzo Ball, more so for the height, but I think very similar to Marcus Smart, a guy that wasn't very good offensively, wasn't very good offensively when he came into the league, but has just gotten better and better every year, really improved there, and, you know, being a defensive stalwart, defensive player of the year this year. I think Dyson Daniels can be a phenomenal perimeter defender, as well as just a good steady point guard on a good team. At number 8, BENNEDICT Mathurin out of Arizona. Some people like this guy a little better. I've seen some say that maybe he can even go 5 to Detroit if Ivy's off the board. I don't know if that's quite the case. I wouldn't put him quite that high, but I like BENNEDICT Mathurin a lot. 6'6", 205 pounds, 20 years old. Will probably play small forward, but could also play some shooting guard. Really good floor spacer, as well as a great transition scorer with his length and athleticism. The defense, there's upside there, but it's not as great as it could be. Reminds me a little bit of Pacers Victor Oladipo, who was good defensively, but his big thing was being able to break down defenders on offense. Has really, you know, become a much better defender in Miami, in my opinion. I think he's better defensively than he was in Indiana, but a guy that can, you know, be a 20-point per game scorer, a guy that has some all-star potential, can be really good for your team. Probably not the best player in a championship team, but a really good complementary piece that does a lot of things offensively. At number 9, I have Jalen DUREN out of Memphis. 6'11", 250 pounds. This guy is a man. He will handle you in the post. He is a beast. 18 years old, one of the younger players in the draft class. Will play center, obviously 6'11", 250, but is a freshman and has some defensive versatility. You know, he's quick enough, he can guard on the post a little bit, and to me that's why I see the defensive comparison to Bam Adebayo. Doesn't shoot quite as well, but will be super physical in the post, and will be a dominant presence down there, I think, from day one. And just as a guy who maybe doesn't have the biggest upside, this guy might never be an all-star for you, but he's going to be a really, really good player. Think DeAndre Ayton for Phoenix, a guy that wasn't an all-star for them, but is huge to their success. I think DUREN will be very similar. Number 10, I have Johnny Davis out of Wisconsin. One of the best scorers in the draft class. 6'6", 195 pounds, 20 years old, shooting guard, sophomore out of Wisconsin. Averaged 20 points a game this year, but is also an elite perimeter defender. Very, very good out there. That's why he reminds me of Chris Middleton, a guy that can break down defenders and get a bucket offensively, as well as be a really good defender. I think he does both of those things very well, as well as being a phenomenal rebounder. Averaged 8 rebounds a game for Wisconsin this year as a 6'6" guard. So that's great to see. Good rebounder, good, you know, scorer of the basketball, as well as a great defender. A lot of things that are really high on a lot of people's, you know, kind of decision making, and he does a lot of those things well. Really has star potential, and a guy that I really like. At number 11, we got AJ Griffin out of Duke. I initially had him higher early on in the pre-draft process, but the injury concerns have, you know, kind of plagued him a little bit for me. But he has risen. There's a point where I had him at 14. I have him back up to 11 just because he is a pure knockdown shooter. You know, 50% in catch and shoot threes, 45% from 3 in total. 6'6", 225 just 220 pounds, but 18 years old, one of the younger players in the draft class as well, just like DUREN. Will play small forward more likely than not. Freshman out of Duke, you know, is really great as a complementary scorer. We saw him next to a guy like BANCHERO this year at Duke, and was really great in a complementary role. Reminds me of guys like Jalen Brown, Jimmy Butler, because of the offense, you know, ability to break down and shoot the ball, as well as play really intense defense. I think he has the ability to do both of those things. I like Griffin a lot. At 12, I got Mark Williams, also out of Duke, the third Duke guy in the top 12. 7'2", one of the winners of the combine, measuring a lot taller than people expected, with a 9'9" standing reach, would be the best in the league from day one. But 240 pounds, 20 years old, center, sophomore out of Duke. We don't see too many sophomores coming out of there, mostly freshmen, but is a guy that was dominant throughout the tournament. Great rebounder, great shot blocker. Reminds me a lot of Robert Williams with the athleticism. And just imagine if Robert Williams is 7'2", that's a guy I want on my team. And I think Mark Williams, you know, with the hustle, with the athleticism, with the ability to block shots and catch lobs, reminds me a lot of Robert, who has been phenomenal in the finals. Really great player, and I think that will cause him to rise on people's boards. At 13, I have Jeremy Sochan out of Baylor. A little higher than some people, lower than others. There are a lot of varying opinions on Sochan, but the best defender in the draft class, in my opinion. 6'9", 230 pounds, 19 years old, power forward, freshman out of Baylor. A guy that's going to be a great defender, good rebounder, good passer, and give you basically nothing offensively. It's just what he's going to do. That's what he's going to be. Not a great offensive player, but it's a guy that reminds me a lot of both Ben Simmons and Draymond Green, kind of point forward extremes, elite point forwards. Reminds me a lot of that, as well as being a phenomenal defender as well. And those are guys you want on your team. Might not get, you know, all the respect they deserve, but are very important players nonetheless. At 14, I had Malaki Branham out of Ohio State, just a scorer of the basketball as well as a good shooter. 6'5", 195 pounds, 19 years old, shooting guard, freshman out of Ohio State. A guy that's just a natural scorer, can break down defenders one-on-one. I've seen him mock to the Rockets recently, as well as BANCHERO. And an offense, you know, that had Branham, you know, BANCHERO and Jalen Green would be almost unstoppable defensively, because they are able to get their own shot basically at any time. I really like Branham as a scorer. The defense needs to get a little better, but 38% from three, as well as being able to create his own shot, is a guy that's very valuable. Reminds me of the best version of Karis LeVert, which I think was in Brooklyn. A guy that can average 20 points, you know, be really great as a scorer. Not do a ton else for you, but score and shoot the ball at high levels. At 15, I have OCHAI AGBAJI out of Kansas. 6'6", 215 pounds, 22 years old, one of the older players in the draft class. Small forward, more likely than not. Can play some shooting guard as well, but I think he should be a small forward at 6'6". Is a senior out of Kansas, a guy that got better every year, as well as improved shooting in his senior year to go along with very good defense, and a confident, you know, good scorer, and a guy that's, you know, really great as a leader as well. Reminds me a lot of Desmond Bane, another four-year guy out of TCU, who's continued to develop in the NBA and get better there as well. You know, good scorer, good shooter with some defensive upside. I think they're very similar players. I like him at 15. At 16, I have Ousmane Dieng out of France, a little lower than some people, but I still like him as a prospect. 6'10", 200 pounds. You don't see a lot of 6'10" guys that are really confident with the ball in their hands as passers, as distributors of the rock, and he's really confident as kind of a point forward type guy. Will probably play small forward, but will have the ball in his hands a lot. Is an international guy, but really fluid on the court. You know, it reminds me a lot of Brandon Ingram with the way that he moves, the way he passes for a forward. Not quite the scoring upside, but a lot of the other aspects of Ingram's game I think are very similar to Dieng. A guy that could be a bust or could be a phenomenal player. He's a guy that's hard to read, but could be really good. At 17, I have TARI out of LSU. Probably the best athlete in the draft class. 6'8", 215 pounds. Might end up being a lottery pick just because of the raw athleticism. 21-year-old sophomore. Played power forward for LSU. I think he'll do the same in the NBA. Reminds me of guys like Jeremy Grant, Jayshawn Tate. You know, with all the hustle, with the defense, with the athleticism, you know, the effort all the time, you know, will lead to some mistakes because of the overwhelming effort, doing a little too much. But I think he's a great player. A guy that, you know, shot really well in his second year at LSU, got a lot better shooting wise, and hopefully that continues to the NBA, because he will be a great value player if his shooting can come along with the elite defense, with the athleticism. I think he's a player that'll be fun to watch develop. At 18, I have EJ Liddell out of Ohio State. Thought about putting him over EASON. I really like Liddell a lot. 6'7", 240 pounds, really big for a guy of that height. 21 years old, power forward, small forward. He can play both of them, kind of a combo forward. And a junior out of Ohio State, a guy that, declared as a sophomore, went through the whole pre-draft process. Sorry about the allergies, by the way. They're horrible. But went through the whole pre-draft process. Ended up going back to Ohio State, improving as a shooter and a defender. Averaged almost 3 blocks a game as a forward. I think I'm really impressed with him as a defender, as a flash defender, as well as a good post defender as well. I like Liddell a lot. I think he's like Matisse Thybulle, but has a really good offensive package as well. Whether it be catch and shoot, breaking down guys, does a lot of things well, mid-range three-point, a lot of different things, and I've been really impressed with his improvement at his time at Ohio State. At 19, I have TYTY Washington out of Kentucky, 6'4", 195 pounds, a guy that's just a really confident passer of the basketball, really great floor general, but also pretty fast and a confident shooter, at least now from mid-range, not as much from 3, but reminds me of Emmanuel Quickley with a little bit less range. With his speed, with his good passing ability, and just kind of the raw athleticism sitting there. And TYTY is a guy that, is probably the second best point guard in this draft class and is a guy that should go in the teens. Excuse me. At 20, I have Jalen Williams out of Santa Clara, 6'6", 210 pounds, 21 years old, out of Santa Clara, small forward, junior. It's just a guy that improved year in and year out. And, like early on in this year's pre-draft process was viewed as kind of a lock to be a second-round pick, but just continue to rise up boards and might be a guy that goes in the teens in the draft class because of the great shooting ability, the defensive upside, as well as being like an assist leader in his time at Santa Clara. Probably won't be asked to do that in the NBA, but can be a great passer as a forward, as well as a good shooter with defensive upside. I think he'll grow throughout his time in the NBA, similarly to OG Anunoby, who's kind of raw coming in, but just got better and better. Also reminds me of TJ Warren's offensive package, just kind of being a microwave scorer, a guy that can shoot and is just a natural scorer of the basketball. He is very similar on that end. At 21, I have Blake Wesley out of Notre Dame. Has a great handle, will break you down one-on-one, as well as being a good athlete, taking off for dunks. 6'4", 185 pounds is a little light for me. I'd like him to be a little heavier, but not too bad. 19 years old, shooting guard, freshman for Notre Dame. A guy that just continued to improve throughout the year and just grow more and more confident as a scorer. Needs the shot to be more consistent, but is really fluid offensively. I like him a lot. Reminds me of guys like Bones Highland and some other similar players, Jamal Crawford, with the ability to break down guys with the handle. At 22, I have Marjon Beauchamp out of the G League Ignite, a guy that I've had a little lower on some previous boards, but I just continue to rise him throughout the process because of the athleticism. Phenomenal athlete, really good hustle player as well. The shooting needs to come along a little bit, but pretty much everything else is there right now. Good defender from day one, great athlete, highlight dunker. 21 years old, small forward out of the G League. Is one of the older G League prospects we've seen. Went to a community college out of high school and then ended up being on the G League, which is great for him. Reminds me a lot of Kelly Oubre Jr. offensively, who has had a lot of flashes of being a really good NBA player. At 23, I have Nikola Jovic out of Serbia, a great playmaker. It's kind of rare to see guys at 6'11" that can pass the ball as well as he can. Really fluid as a passer and a scorer, but just doesn't offer you a lot defensively. 225 pounds, 19 years old, small forward, out of Serbia, and just as a guy that needs to improve defensively to be a good NBA player. I think right now he can survive defensively, but I think he has a lot of room to improve there. But the scoring as well as the passing is something that'll be hard to ignore. It reminds me a lot of Denver Danilo Gallinari, how he was with the Nuggets as a scorer, passer of the basketball. I think Jovic is a better passer, but I think the offensive scoring-wise is very comparable. At 24, I have Kennedy Chandler out of Tennessee. If he was 6'4" like TYTY, I think he'd be, in the conversation to be a lottery pick, but he's not, so he isn't. 170 pounds, 19 years old, only 6 feet, again, pretty short. But point guard, freshman out of Tennessee, is a guy that got better throughout the year. Great passer of the basketball, good scorer as well. Excuse me, the defense isn't as good as TYTY. He's going to get bullied defensively a little bit. But with the shiftiness, you know, the shooting ability, reminds me a lot of Tyrese Maxey. Also, Darius Garland is kind of an extreme comparison. I don't think he'll hit that level, but he does have a lot of upside at 24. At 25, I have Jake LaRavia out of Wake Forest. Really great passer again as a forward, just seems to make all his teammates better, as well as being really fluid as a shooter and finishing around the rim. Doesn't really get sped up, that's why he's very similar to Kyle Anderson as a guy that doesn't get sped up, plays at his own pace, great passer as a forward. 6'8", 225 pounds. For Wake Forest, 20 years old, little older, but he is a junior. Power forward, is a guy that I think could go in the teens. I put him there in my last mock draft. He seems to continue to rise because of the more film people watch of him. I like LaRavia a lot, but I think he's probably not, you know, in the teens of players on my board. So I have him at 25 here, very similar to Kyle Anderson, who's a good NBA player. At 26, I have Hugo Bassan out of France. Just a really natural scorer of the basketball, as well as a shooter and a flashy passer. 6'6", pretty tall for a guard, can play both shooting guard and point guard. Only 180 pounds, is a little light, but that's okay with me. 21 years old, out of France, you know, but is a guy that is a natural scorer, has a nice offensive package, similarly to Jalen Brunson, what we saw from him in the playoffs. As a taller player, though, you know, being a good passer as well, like Brunson is. He's not as good of a defender. Bassan needs to work on his defense and some careless turnovers, but the shooting looks good, the scoring is good, as well as the passing. A lot of good offensive, you know, factors, and I think that's going to be, you know, something that NBA teams are interested in. At 27, this is a guy that's kind of, you know, up for debate because he was phenomenal as a high school guy, really highly recruited, but just didn't have a good season in the G League. It just wasn't there. But I think because of the upside, he's still going to go first round. 6'4", 200 pounds, 20 years old, shooting guard for the G League. Reminds me a lot of Cam Thomas, is kind of a not as small, but kind of a microwave scorer who can be a phenomenal player off the bench, but can start for you if need be. There are some comparisons to Bradley Beal, but I think that's kind of lofty. I think Cam Thomas is a better comparison, who at points for the Nets this year was averaging 20 points a game. So I think that that's a guy that's good to be compared to, and I do like Hardy, but I think you're taking a risk when you pick him. At 28, I have Kai Sotto out of the Philippines. 7'3", 240 pounds, 20 years old, center, international player. Is a guy that I think is a first-round talent. A lot of people don't agree with me, but I think he is a first-round talent. It's just not very often we see guys that are 7'3" that move as well as he does, that are fluid defensively as a shot blocker, and, you know, moving laterally is pretty fluid there as well as being a really great shooter of the basketball. Shot 39% from three this year for his team in the NBL. Playing against great competition. Didn't get a ton of minutes, but when he was out there, flashed a lot of good things. Good rebounder, interior scorer, lob threat, with some three-point abilities. Reminds me a little bit of Kristaps Porzingis. I don't think he'll be that level of player in the NBA, but can be a very good NBA player that eventually might be a starter in this league. Excuse me. At 29, I have Christian Koloko out of Arizona, a very athletic center. Not very similar to Kai Sotto. Very different game. 7 feet tall, 220 pounds, 22 years old. One of the older players in the class, but is a guy that's a great athlete with some shooting upside, you know, but right now more of a Clint Capella type. Good defender, lob threat, pick and roll guy, but is a guy with more upside than that. I think maybe, you know, he has some shooting ability. It just hasn't quite been unlocked yet. And at 30, I have Andrew Nembhard out of Gonzaga, one of the real winners of the Combine, looking like a dominant player there. 6'4", 195 pounds, 22 years old, was a fifth-year senior for Gonzaga, was there a long time. But reminds me of Tyus Jones as a guy who's a great backup point guard, really steady with a nice offensive package as well as being a great passer, good defender. I think Nembhard is that guy to be a great backup point guard in the NBA and should go first round in my opinion. But let's get through the rest of the rankings. Won't take quite as long. 31 through 40. Let me move out of the way here. Let me move the camera out of the way, sorry. But At 31, I have Bryce McGowan out of Nebraska. Very good scorer, good athlete. At 32, Christian Brown out of Kansas. Great finisher at the rim. Confident shooter, good defender. Walker Kessler at 33. Phenomenal rim protector, probably the best rim protector in this draft class. At 34, we have Kendall Brown out of Baylor. Great athlete with some shooting upside. 35, Dalen Terry, tall point guard out of Arizona that just gives 110% out there. At 36, we have Trevor Keels, really physical, kind of push you around guard, small forward out of Duke. At 37, Ismail Kamagate, the kind of raw physical prospect at center out of France. At 38, Peyton Watson out of UCLA, viewed very highly out of high school, didn't get a ton of play time at UCLA, but a phenomenal athlete nonetheless. At 39, I have Wendell Moore out of Duke. A guy that just does a lot of different things well. Not really great at any specific thing, but is really, really good in a lot of different areas. At 40, I have Patrick Baldwin out of Milwaukee. A guy that I'm just not really all that high on. Recorded one of the worst vertical jumps in NBA Combine history. On top of, having a bad season when he was healthy this year at a poor competition level for Milwaukee. Just a guy that I'm not very high on. Sorry, back over here. At 41 through 50, I have a lot of guys with high upside. Caleb Houston, really high, recruited out of high school. Just a great scorer, good defender, feels like a bucket getter out of Michigan. 42, Gene Montero out of the Overtime Elite will be the first basketball player drafted out of their new league, which I love to see new pathways to the NBA. At 43, Josh Minott out of Memphis. Very good athlete, just another one of those guys that Penny Hardaway hit on. At 44, Max Christie out of Michigan State. Good scorer, but not going to bring you a ton defensively. Ryan Rollins out of Toledo. Good shooter, good passer at 45. Jalen Williams at 46. Great athlete, physical center at 46. J.D. Davidson out of Alabama, is a guy that was recruited high out of high school and is a phenomenal athlete as a point guard, but just wasn't very good at Alabama. It did hurt his draft stock a pretty good amount. At 48, we have David Roddy out of Colorado State. Football player type build, really physical, kind of undersized at forward, but will bully if he gets switches with guards on him. At 49, we have Justin Lewis out of Marquette, and at 50, Jabari Walker out of Colorado. 51 through 60, finishing up the top 60. At 51, I have Alondas Williams out of Wake Forest. Good passer, pretty tall for a point guard as well, with some defensive upside. At 52, Travion Williams out of Purdue. Really great at Purdue this year as an interior scorer. At 53, I have Orlando Robinson out of Fresno State. Just seems to do a lot of different things well. Really good athlete, good defender, good shot blocker, good interior scorer as well. At 54, I have Ron Harper Jr. Great basketball player, good at a lot of different things, good as a scorer, but doesn't have a ton of upside. At 55, Darion Sebron out of NC State. 56, Julian Champagne out of St. John's. 57, one of the most loved players in the class with Johnny Juzang. Phenomenal scorer of the basketball. That's what he's going to do. He's going to be a great scorer off the bench. 58, John Butler out of FSU. Just a big, talented guy. Struggling here. At 59, I have Scottie Pippen Jr. out of Vanderbilt. Really great scorer, average over 20 points a game this year for Vandy. I think he probably should be a little higher, and I don't know why he's getting disrespected as much as he is, but I don't like to disagree with NBA scouts too hard because I think they probably know what they're doing. But I think Pippen is a guy that'll be good value toward the back of the second round or undrafted. And at 60, I have Kofi Cockburn, 20-10, the guy this year at Illinois. I'm a little concerned about him because Luka Garza was a dominant college big as well, who is kind of more an old school big, just like Kofi. So I'm a little concerned of how he's going to be in the NBA, but is a guy with some upside as a physical, great rebounder. But that's going to be it for today's big board. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, like, subscribe. Trying to hit 5K by the end of the summer. I think we can do it. Hopefully you really enjoyed. I did. I enjoy making these. I really like big boards. This is my last one for the year, so I hope you enjoyed the series of them. And again, thank you so much for watching. That's going to be it for me today. Hope you have a good rest of your day. Peace.